What's good in the YouTube? This is Crazy Samurai Anyone here bringing another video. Today I'm bringing a video on Kamen Rider Build episode 35. This episode is called Tower of Destruction, and this episode is pretty interesting. A lot of stuff happens. It's definitely an episode that's showing that we're getting closer and closer towards the end of the season. As you may be wondering, how many more episodes do I think that there will be? I would imagine 13 episodes would be the end point. Could be a little bit later, could be a little bit earlier. The most I could see it being is 15 more episodes, meaning that it would end episode 50. But more likely than not, I'm expecting like episode 48 or 46 or something like that. Again, we'll have to wait and see what they do end up doing. I wouldn't be against either. Next episode should be introducing us to the new final form, just giving us a glimpse of it, and then episode 37 will likely be the episode where we actually get to see the final form for Sento in action. So keep that in mind. As far as things go otherwise, this episode was pretty interesting. The episode began with us actually seeing that, Ryoga had transformed into Kamen Rider Evil Dragon form because Evil ended up embodying him rather than embodying Shuichi. Yes, Shuichi is now separate from Evolto, which is very, very interesting to consider because this whole time he's been embodied by him. Now, what does end up happening is that he ends up going into the facility where the Pandora's box is being held, and when he goes there, Sento ends up going after him to try to get back, to try to protect the Pandora's box. And when he goes there, he tries to stop him, but he has no energy. And what this leads to is eventually a conversation between Evolto and Sento, where it's explained, a bunch of different things about, why all these things have happened over time. So, like, for example, as we know, Ryoga is supposed to be part of Evolto. And the reason, and what was explained is like how things actually came about, which is something that I kind of talked about in the previous episode, that I was kind of wondering like why he separated himself and all that. And that was a thing that they never had explained in the previous episode, and that was the thing that I was wondering and questioning about why that was the case. So what we do end up learning is that the reason why he ended up separating himself in the first place was because he wanted to destroy another planet. And so what he did was he took a part of his Martian body and sent it on this Martian probe to send it back to the home planet, and then have it inhabit a person on that planet so that he could use them to destroy the Earth or whatever planet it lands on. Well, what ended up happening was, as we know, instead of it inhabiting Ryoga's mother, which would have been, beneficial to Evolto, it actually inhabited the infant child that was still being born, meaning that it had no memories and it could be sculpted and shaped any way people or things changed it, meaning that it never knew of the desire to destroy and, get rid of people and destroy the universe or destroy a world. Its only way of thinking was whatever it was taught from the time it was born onward. So it never was taught to be evil and destroy things. It was only taught what it grew up learning, which is a very important detail, because had the mother gained the DNA, yes, the Earth would have been destroyed. But because it didn't happen, that's why things occurred the way they did. So that's a very interesting thing to note, and that actually makes a lot of sense now that I think about it. Because I remember the Martian DNA, and that was the part that I was still really confused about as to why he separated him in the first place, but now it makes a lot of sense. And so because of this, what this led to was Evolto ended up taking over Shuichi's body when he was on the Mars mission to go back to Earth to reclaim what remained of his DNA that existed on Earth. So that's why he came to Earth in the first place, was to get back the rest of his body, and so that he could destroy the Earth on his own. And that's why this whole entire thing happened in the first place. He wanted to gain back his full power by going back to Earth and gaining it, and then using his new body to take over the Earth. So it's interesting. It makes a lot of sense now, and that totally makes sense. But it's like that definitely needed to be addressed, and I'm glad that they did that because again, they're really good at addressing things that like you make you think, well, wait, what about this? Then they'll go about addressing it, and that's really good that they do that. This show is like really, really good about like if there's an idea, if there's something that's story wise that seems like, well, what about this? They'll give you an explanation. Maybe not the first episode that you hear about it, although this time it was that way. But sometimes maybe it's 10 episodes in that you learn, or 15 episodes in, or 20, you know. That's the thing that's kind of interesting about this show is like how it always gives you stuff, but you know, you don't always get it right away. In this case, it actually was pretty quickly. So, anyway, from here, what does end up happening is that he ends up taking the Pandora's box, and eventually Sento does faint. Following this, what we do end up seeing is that Sawa and Kazumi end up rescuing Soichi. So, in other words, they get back the owner who they keep in a hospital, and he seems like himself. Like, he seems normal. He doesn't seem like he's being controlled or anything. But he's also unconscious, so there's really no clue as to what's going on in his mind, what will happen in the future. Will he suddenly become a good guy? You know, what's going to happen from here? Will he even be fighting anymore? That's another question we have no idea about so far. Now, what we do end up seeing from here is that also Sento is resting. In the meantime, we end up seeing that Mizora is looking with Kazumi over Sento, and Kazumi really wants to kind of build a connection with Mizora because Mizora currently refers to Kazumi as Grease. Yet she doesn't even refer to him as Kazumi because they're not connected that way. Like, they're not really close, they're not really friends, they're just sort of like allies. And in reality, Kazumi really wants to build that connection, wants to be able to have that situation where he's being referred to by his name. And the thing is that he wants to show sympathy for her in this dark time, but what does end up happening is that eventually Sento wakes up, and before he can even get to it, he misses his opportunity, so he can't build up that connection to her. Interesting, though. Does bring up some interesting ideas, of course. Does that mean that eventually they will build some connection? I would hope so. Nothing is certain as of now, but we have to wait and see. But I did love the whole entire internal monologue that he was having with himself. That was just, you felt something for him. It was just like, you wanted him to build that connection, but at the same time, it's just sort of funny seeing his actions and his movements and his, you know, him struggling. I mean, I don't want him to struggle, but you know what I mean. Like, it's sort of interesting to see how he acts out in this internal monologue because it shows a lot on his part. Now, what we do end up seeing from here is that eventually, when Sento does end up waking up, they do end up discussing things, and what we do end up seeing elsewhere at where Evolto is taking the form of Kamen Rider Evil Dragon form, he ends up talking to Namba with the Pandora's box, and he says, "We got the Pandora's box. I'm still loyal to you, but we're still missing one bottle in order to gain the full power of the Pandora's box." And the thing is that Namba wants to rule over the entire world. That's a definite. Now, what does end up happening is that Namba, you know, he really is determined to do that. But what does end up happening from here is that we end up having Sento, who, you know, they know that he's missing one bottle. They're missing one bottle, and he immediately ends up calling Gentaku in. So yes, Gentaku is actually called into the cafe where he is called to help out. And what does end up happening is that he shows the bottle that he has, which is the only bottle that they're missing, which is the Phoenix bottle. The Phoenix bottle is the one bottle that's missing. So yes, the Phoenix Robo bottle, or the Phoenix bottle, whatever you want to call it, Phoenix and Robo combination, that's one thing. But just the Phoenix bottle itself is missing. So what does end up happening is that they're having this conversation and they're discussing about working together and making sure that he can't get that Evolto can't get to the bottle and keeping it safe. But what does end up happening is that Ryoga suddenly teleports into the room and he immediately says, "I'm having a little destruction party" or something like that. And what he does is that he says, "You're all invited except for the Queen of Mars." At that point, he ends up using his energy to knock her out, and then Gentaku, Ryoga, Kazumi, and Sento are all sent to to the inside of the Pandora Tower, at least the part that's formed so far. So while they're in there, they each transform, and what we do end up seeing is that a battle ensues. This battle leads to lots of conflict, and if you're wondering what that noise is, there's a bird chirping right outside my window right now, so if you're hearing chirping, that's all it is. It's unfortunate. I really wish that I didn't have to deal with that right now, but just keep it in mind. So anyway, what does end up happening from here is that we end up seeing, Kazumi trying to fight. He gets beaten back to the point that he's knocked out of the Pandora's Tower. Gentaku tries to distract him while also holding off with the Phoenix bottle. And what does end up happening is Gentaku is launched also outside of the building. So yes, he's in rogue form. And what does end up happening from here after being launched out, and we end up seeing that Kazumi and Rogue are together. And the thing is that what's really cool about this episode is that actually, they're working together. Like, it's really cool to see Rogue working on the same side as Sento and the others. Like, that's really great, and something makes me think that, like, now they're going to work alongside each other for the long haul, I would imagine. I don't think that they're going to be, enemies anymore, at least not that I could imagine. Because at this point, it's sort of like, why would you be enemies in a situation where, like, the greatest evil is trying to destroy the entire universe or the entire world, basically? So, that's a very important detail. So what does end up happening from here is that eventually Sento manages to knock back a panel, which the thing is that Ryoga has been trying to put the panels onto the Pandora's box with a full bottle set each. And he does manage to put a couple of them on, but eventually one of the panels, he manages to remove some of the Sento manages to get to the bottles and removes them from the panel. And what happens is that he ends up using different forms with the hazard mode. Yes, he goes back to the hazard mode. So first he ends up using Kaiser Gresha, which is, pirate train mode, in hazard mode, which is very cool to see him use that. And that's a very interesting thing. And what also is interesting from here is that we actually end up seeing Ryoga use the Cobra form, so he can still use it in that form. It's just that he starts off with the Cobra form, then he eventually moves on to the Dragon form. And then what we end up seeing for Sento is that Sento starts off with the Kaiser Gresha form, but then he ends up switching to Key Dragon form. Yes, he actually uses the Key Dragon form, and what does end up happening is that Evolto says, "Isn't that kind of insensitive to Ryoga using his dragon bottle?" And Sento just gets annoyed, and we just see fighting that occurs. It's very interesting. What does end up happening eventually at one point is that Sento does end up transforming into tank mode, and he ends up fighting against the dragon form for Evolto, for Kamen Rider Evil, and we end up seeing this battle ensue. Sento does pretty well, but he still can't match him in combat. We do end up hearing conversations about how, had it not been for Evolto, the war that they have may not have ever happened, but at the same time, what the important detail to keep in mind is that there still might have been things that may have ensued. Now, the other thing to keep in mind that was brought up was the fact that, I forgot to mention this before, that when he went to Earth, Evolto, he did end up working with Katsuragi's father to, gain research data and learn about Ryoga. Now, that's a small detail. I just want to bring that up right now, that there was interactions, and that's why I presume that he killed himself, because he didn't want Evolto to gain the power that he was looking to gain. Because he did end up repairing the evil driver, Katsuragi's father. That's a side note I forgot to mention. Anyway, from here, what we do end up seeing is that eventually Sento is knocked to the point that he can't keep fighting. He does end up losing all the bottles that he managed to recover, and eventually what does end up happening is that the Pandora's Tower begins to form. And the thing is that just prior to this, we end up seeing that Namba, he ends up talking to Utsumi about how he doesn't want the Pandora's box to be fully accessed. He wants it to be stopped. So he wants Evolto to stop using the Pandora's box once he has all the bottles, because he doesn't want to actually use the power. He wants to be more of a threat. So in other words, meaning he wants to say he has this power without actually using it, and then if he has to, he'll use it. That's the big difference here. He's trying to more or less be a threatening figure rather than actually becoming someone who destroys the earth. That's the big difference here. But what does end up happening is that as Ryo is putting on the panels and everything, Utsumi comes over trying to stop him, and he ends up being knocked back, and eventually all the panels are put on the Pandora's box, and the Pandora Tower begins to completely form. So we end up seeing the complete formation of the Pandora's box, which leads to the Pandora Tower completely rising up and taking form, and eventually at that point we end up seeing that things are only going to get more interesting from here. Now, as far as things go with the preview for the next episode, because basically that's where the episode ends, we end up seeing that the Martian Queen will be talking to Sento and the others. He will be gaining a new bottle that will look like a big box. Initially, it's a very basic plain box. What probably that has to do with is that it will start off that way, and then he'll unlock the power to actually gain the full power of it, because there is supposed to be a real form to the new bottle device that he's gonna have, because it's similar to, it's like a bigger bottle thing that's gonna go where his bottles typically go. And we'll see that in the near future. What we do see in the preview is that Sento will be gaining a new look. And by that I mean he'll be gaining white hair or something like that. Basically, if you've seen how Naga looked in Q Ranger, imagine having a wig like that. That's the kind of thing that he's doing, only it's gonna look like his kind of hairstyle, which doesn't mean that their hairstyles weren't the same, but there were slight differences. I think that Naga's hair was a little bit bigger as far as the wig goes, and Sento's hair is a lot shorter. So yeah, he's gonna have this white hair, and he's gonna gain the evil driver as well next episode with this bottle. So that's very interesting to see. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how that whole thing will work out. So please remember to like, comment, subscribe. I'd love to know your guys' opinions on this episode. And see you guys in the next video. So until then, guys, I'm Crazy Samurai 71, and goodbye, guys.